I had always been plain, forgettable, a shadow in the crowd. At 30, life had settled into a predictable routine. Wake up, work, go home, scroll mindlessly through my phone until I passed out. Somewhere along the way, I had faded into the background, lost in the monotony of my own existence. I needed change. I needed to stand out. That's when I found the ad. New age, new me, vibrant colors, salon quality results. Right at home, easy to use, long-lasting, and ridiculously affordable. The images were captivating. People with electric blue, neon green, and fiery orange hair, looking confident and alive. Orange. That was it. That was what I needed. Bright, daring, impossible to ignore. The price was absurdly cheap, but the reviews were glowing. Besides, how hard could it be? I placed the order. The package arrived in 2 days, wrapped in flimsy plastic with a label that looked off. The font was slightly blurred, and the instructions were printed in awkward English. But I shrugged it off. The pictures looked professional. The reviews said it worked. That's all that mattered. I laid out the contents: bleach powder, developer, and the neon orange dye. I mixed the bleach and applied it carefully, just like the instructions said. At first, it wasn't bad. There was a strong chemical smell, but it was oddly pleasant, sweet, almost floral. I chuckled to myself. People always complain about how painful bleaching is. Maybe I have a high pain tolerance. Then, at the 20-minute mark, the tingling started. At 25 minutes, the tingling turned into a burn. By 30 minutes, my scalp felt like it was being stabbed by 1,000 tiny needles. I gritted my teeth, forcing myself to endure. Beauty is pain, right? When I finally rinsed it out, the water ran pale yellow. My hair, if you could still call it that, was now a ghostly, washed-out blonde. My scalp throbbed, my skin felt raw. But I convinced myself this was normal. People do this all the time. Ignoring the lingering sting, I tore open the tube of dye and carefully massaged the thick, orange paste into my hair. The burning sensation from the bleach hadn't fully faded, but I pushed through. The instructions said to leave it on for 30 minutes. I sat back against the bathroom wall, feeling the warmth of the dye on my scalp, my eyelids growing heavy. Just a few minutes. Just to rest. I don't remember falling asleep. A sharp, tearing pain jolted me awake. I gasped, my scalp feeling wrong, tight, heavy, like something was pulling at my head. I reached up, fingers trembling. My hair was hard, not just stiff, not just dry, solid, like stone. Panic surged through me. I scrambled to the sink, twisting the faucet handle, shoving my head under the icy stream of water. Nothing. The dye wouldn't rinse out. My hair remained stiff, frozen in place like a helmet of dried glue. I grabbed a comb and forced it through my strands. A sharp, blinding pain exploded in my skull. Something tore. I looked down. Not just hair. A piece of my scalp. A pinkish-red chunk of flesh, still tangled with bright orange strands, clung to the teeth of the comb. I stared. My breath came in short, ragged gasps. I lifted my trembling hand to my head, feeling gaps, raw, wet, exposed patches of skin where hair should be. I screamed. Desperate, I clawed at my hair, trying to shake it loose. The pain was unbearable, but I couldn't stop. A sickening, wet rip. More flesh peeled away. The sink filled with pieces of me. Water swirled red and orange, clogging the drain. I stumbled back, panting, my vision swimming with dark spots. Then I saw myself in the mirror. My scalp was a patchwork of open wounds, raw and oozing. Blood dripped down my temples, pooling at my collar. The dye had seeped into my torn flesh, staining my exposed skin bright orange. I wasn't a man anymore. I was a thing, a grotesque, skinless thing with a melted, blood-drenched skull. I opened my mouth to scream again, but no sound came out. My body gave out. The world spun. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and regret. The doctor examined my head, his face carefully neutral. He had seen worse. That scared me more than anything.
The chemicals have caused severe chemical burns. The tissue is necrotic,
he said, his voice low.
There's nothing we can do to save it.
I barely felt the razor as they shaved away the last remnants of my hair. My new face stared back at me from the hospital mirror. Bald, scarred, unrecognizable. I had changed, but not in the way I wanted. Back home, I sat in front of my laptop, staring at the ad that had started it all. New age, new me. My own reflection haunted the dark screen, my scalp a battlefield of pink scars. I let out a dry, humorless laugh. Click, report address. Click, block user. Because now I knew the truth. Some transformations aren't worth the price.
I pushed the glass door open, greeted by the faint smell of acetone and cheap air freshener. The nail salon was cramped, with walls adorned by faded posters of hands flaunting impeccable nails. The flickering fluorescent light above made the already dim space feel even more unsettling. But I didn't care about ambience. I just needed to distract myself, to feel like I was taking care of myself for once after weeks of spiraling since losing my job. The woman who greeted me had a weary smile. Her hands, however, stole my attention. Covered in warts and blemishes, they were grotesque. My stomach turned, but I told myself to stay calm. "Don't judge her," I muttered under my breath. "She's probably had a tough life, just like you." I sat in the cracked leather chair and placed my hands on the counter. She began filing my nails with clinical precision, her touch robotic. I avoided staring at her hands too long, keeping my gaze fixed on the grimy counter instead. After finishing my nails, she looked at my feet.
"Your toenails are too long,"
she said, her voice monotone but firm.
"We need to trim them."
I hesitated. My hands were one thing, but my feet? I wasn't sure if I trusted her enough for that. But before I could say no, she was already adjusting the chair and motioning for me to lift my leg. The first few trims were fine, but when she reached the corner of my big toe, pain shot through my foot like lightning. I yelped, jerking my leg back. She didn't flinch.
"Hold still,"
she said, grabbing a small bottle of disinfectant. She dabbed it onto the wound, and I winced as it stung.
"It's just a small cut, nothing serious,"
she reassured me, though her face betrayed no real concern. I glanced down at my toe. There was a tiny hollow at the edge of my nail, as if the clipper had gouged too deep. "Are you sure this is okay?" I asked nervously. Without answering, she reached into her drawer and pulled out a syringe.
"This will help with the pain,"
she said. I froze. "A shot? Is that really necessary?" She nodded curtly.
"Only a local anesthetic. You won't feel anything after this."
Before I could argue, the needle was in. The relief was immediate, the sharp throbbing in my toe dulled to nothingness, and for a moment, I relaxed. That night, the itch began. It was subtle at first, just a faint tickle at the edge of my big toe. I dismissed it as part of the healing process. But as the hours dragged on, the itch deepened. I scratched absent-mindedly until my skin felt raw, but the itch wouldn't stop. The next morning, I woke to find my foot swollen, the skin around the cut reddish and tight. The itching had spread, crawling up my foot like an invisible infestation. Panicking, I returned to the salon. The woman wasn't there.
She's sick.
Another worker explained.
She won't be back for a while.
I felt a pang of unease but said nothing. That night, the itch turned into something worse. My foot began to ache, the skin growing hot and lumpy. Small, pale patches appeared around the wound, like moss clinging to a tree. I couldn't take it anymore. My foot was unrecognizable, bloated, discolored, and covered in strange fungal growths. Desperation drove me back to the salon. This time, another nail technician attended to me, her face a mask of indifference. She examined my foot and immediately retrieved a needle.
This will drain it,
she said flatly. I watched in horror as she pierced the swollen patches. Thick, yellowish fluid oozed out, carrying with it fragments of the fungal growth. But instead of relief, the fungus seemed to react violently. It spread faster, the pale patches climbing up my leg, merging into grotesque clusters. The sensation was unbearable. My skin burned and tightened as if something alive was writhing beneath it. I clutched the sides of the chair, tears streaming down my face. "What's happening to me?" I screamed. She didn't answer. Her expression remained blank as she worked, stabbing at the growths with mechanical precision. I didn't know if she noticed, but the infection had reached my hands. The skin on my arms bubbled and cracked, the fungus spreading in relentless waves. My vision blurred, my head spinning from the pain. The last thing I heard was a voice, not from inside my head, but distant and cold.
Don't let this get out, or we won't be able to do business anymore.
Brazil was everything I dreamed it would be. Warm sun, vibrant music, and miles of golden sand stretching as far as the eye could see. Miles, my best friend and perpetual thrill-seeker, had planned every detail of our trip. He swore up and down it would be life-changing. So, when he suggested we visit a unique, authentic snake massage spa, I hesitated. The very mention of snakes made my stomach churn. But Miles laughed off my concerns.
Come on, man,
He said, grinning from ear to ear.
it's all the rage. People say it's therapeutic. Plus, what's the point of a vacation if we don't try something crazy?
Against my better judgment, I agreed. The spa was tucked away in a narrow alley, its faded sign barely legible under the dim streetlights. The door creaked ominously as we entered, and the air inside was thick with the mingling scents of incense and damp earth.
Relax.
Miles said, clapping me on the shoulder.
It's supposed to feel ancient, authentic.
The receptionist, a tall woman with piercing green eyes, led us into a room that looked like a jungle terrarium. Vines hung from the ceiling, and the ground slithered. Hundreds of snakes of varying sizes and colors writhed on the floor, their scales catching the dim light like tiny shards of glass. Okay, nope, I'm out. I whispered, my voice cracking, but Miles was already stepping out of his shoes.
They're harmless, non-venomous. Just let them crawl around a bit. It's supposed to be good for circulation.
He lowered himself onto the snake-covered floor, leaning back with a satisfied sigh as the creatures began slithering over his legs.
See? Totally fine.
He said, waving me over. My body refused to move, but Miles's teasing was relentless. Eventually, I convinced myself to take a single step. The moment my bare foot touched the floor, the cold, slimy texture of a snake's scales brushed against my skin. I froze. Another snake curled around my ankle, its tiny, harmless bite sending a strange, tingling sensation up my leg. My heart raced, but as more snakes swarmed around me, I began to feel oddly numb.
Not so bad, right?
Miles grinned. I wanted to scream at him, but my throat was dry. The next phase of the treatment was supposed to be deep relaxation. We were led to 2 massage tables and instructed to lie face down. The room was dark now, lit only by flickering candles. The snakes had been cleared from the floor, but the eerie hissing sound remained, echoing faintly through the walls. As I lay there, the sensation of something smooth and heavy rolling across my back made me shudder. "It's just part of the process," I whispered to myself. "Breathe. It's fine." For a moment I managed to relax. The weight moving along my spine felt oddly soothing, like a warm compress. But then I felt it slither up my shoulder. "That's not a hand," I muttered, eyes snapping open. The sight that greeted me froze my blood. A massive snake was coiled around Miles, its thick body constricting him like a vice. He looked at me, gasping for air, but he was smiling.
It's fine. These snakes are trained. It's...
His voice broke off into a choking wheeze as the snake tightened its grip. Panic surged through me. "Miles!" I shouted, jumping off the table. But before I could reach him, something heavy dropped onto my back. The impact knocked the air from my lungs. It was another snake. This one was even larger, its muscular body wrapping itself around my chest and shoulders. Its scales were cold and rough, scratching against my skin as it coiled tighter and tighter. I clawed at it, trying to free myself, but the more I struggled, the tighter it squeezed. My vision blurred as my chest heaved, desperate for air. I could hear Miles screaming now, his voice a hoarse, guttural cry.
Help me!
I tried to look at him, but the snake's tail wrapped around my neck, pinning my head in place. My pulse pounded in my ears as the edges of my vision darkened. With one final burst of adrenaline, I threw myself sideways off the table. The snake's grip loosened just enough for me to suck in a ragged breath. I hit the floor hard, the impact jolting through my ribs, but I was free. For a moment I lay there, gasping and disoriented. Then I heard it, a low, guttural hiss. I turned my head just in time to see the snake lunging toward me, its massive jaws unhinged and gaping wide. I scrambled backward, but there was nowhere to go. The snake's mouth engulfed me, its sharp teeth slicing into my skin as it began to swallow me whole.
To my surprise, the person using Anna's credit card was a man. Could it be that I have made a mistake? Impossible. Surely in this human taco case, Amila has an accomplice.
Looks like it's time to catch the nasty little mouse.
Amila, how did she come back so soon? I quickly hid in one of the rooms. Whatever Amila's words meant, my instincts told me that if she caught me, nothing good would come of it. She entered the room, her footsteps growing louder as she got closer to my hiding spot. I held my breath, heart pounding, but thankfully she didn't seem interested in checking the wardrobe. I wanted to escape this house as fast as I could, but just then, a notebook caught my eye. This was exactly what I had been looking for. I nervously opened the notebook. On the very first page, I saw a photo of Amela, and that man, Frank. My suspicions were spot on. They were indeed connected, though it seemed there was no marital tie between them. The notebook was like Pandora's box. The deeper I delved, the more horrifying truths came to light. The caster cult had indeed been sacrificing victims and eating their flesh. They even took photos to document their achievements. All the missing victims had been turned into their food. It was beyond disgusting. At that moment, the wardrobe door burst open without warning. The sudden flood of light blinded me.
Found the little mischievous mouse.
My heart raced wildly. Acting on instinct, I mustered every bit of training I had from the police academy and attacked the two figures in front of me to try and escape. But my strength alone wasn't enough. I was facing two serial killers. Frank's biceps wrapped tightly around my neck, the searing pain making it feel as though my neck could snap at any moment. I struggled in vain, my vision dimming until everything faded to black. I had no idea how long I'd been unconscious. When I woke up, my whole body ached and my head was spinning. But the figure standing before me snapped me back to full awareness.
Finally awake. I've been waiting for you for a long time.
Joel, you scared me. Did our team manage to capture Frank and Amela? Why am I here? Why was Joel here? Did he save me? But why bring me to this place? This looked like a human slaughterhouse. Joel, can you get me out of here first?
You're too naive. Haven't you wondered how Amela found you so quickly?
Get away from me, you freak!
You little wretch. You filthy outsider. Only the purified followers of Caster are worthy of leading this world. The rest of you, you're nothing but reserve stock for us.
You're insane. People like you are the ones who deserve to be eliminated by society and punished by the law. At that moment, Frank and Amela entered the room.
High Priest, is everything all right?
High Priest, are you hurt?
I've made my decision. This sinner here will be the next sacrifice for the day of sharing. Until then, make her suffer and atone for all of us.
Excellent. Let this sinner become divine sustenance to cleanse us.
For the sake of population control and purification!
I was terrified and utterly helpless. The people I was facing were no longer human. They were bloodthirsty monsters. They dressed me in a white gown and tied me to a large pillar. I looked like a helpless lamb awaiting slaughter. Then the butcher appeared, holding a thin blade and a silver platter. A chilling dread enveloped me. All I could do was scream in terror, but my cries seemed to excite him even more. With a swift, precise cut, he treated me like a giant block of cheese to be carved and scraped at his will. I was still alive, but it was a fragile existence, sustained only until the day of sharing. And with all the hatred Joel harbored for me, each day dragged on in agony. To them, I was nothing more than a substitute offering, a vessel for their so-called atonement. Finally, the day of sharing has arrived. I can no longer distinguish whether this marks the end of my days of suffering or the beginning of my ultimate torment. With all my remaining strength, I began my crazy plan of revenge. No matter the cost, I would not let those evil people get what they wanted. With a bottle of rust remover and some iron filings, I would create a deadly poison that would destroy me, but would also drag those who had harmed me to hell. The demons entered the room, but I was no longer afraid.
We offer this sinner as a sacrifice for atonement, so that we and those who consume her flesh may be cleansed of sin.
You can laugh now, but soon, my flesh and blood will kill you all.
Ore Lumina.
Ore Luminar.
Ore Luminar.
Ore Luminar.
The tacos made from my flesh will poison your customers. The police will come for you soon. I close my eyes with a satisfied smile, as if somewhere in the distance I hear the sound of police sirens, growing louder, enveloping me.